Print ranges out?
I just did it.
Oh, look at you.
I just need when you show the actual board up, and I don't have I got my phone. Yep.
Okay. And we're up.
Oh,
Let's see.
so unprepared. Wow. Let me get that goopy out of my eye. Hi, everybody. What's up? Hey, Dr. Misak here. I hope you guys are ready for a different fun show. We are going to talk a little bit about ranges today. I hope everybody's well. Got some good needed rest on the week off, and I am just caught off guard today. Trying to get things done and be ready, and there's never enough time in the mornings to get everything done that we're trying to do. So one of my favorites is always to start with the Bible verse. I love the YouVersion Bible app, and I like this is just Proverbs 22:6. It's just start children off in the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. I mean, that's a promise that I'll accept, and because during the, maybe not old, but during the middle years, they do turn from it. I'll tell you that. I know I did when I was a kid.
We've got Jackie on. We've got a couple of people on.
Oh, good. Good morning, Jackie. Let me see if I can pull up my YouTube here and just be online with us so I can see what's going on, and I can be with us here. Let me see my channel, and here we go. There's a show called Energy Ranges with Dr. Misak. Oh, that's neat. Okay. So good morning, Diana, Jackie, Leah. Good morning. Go car go. Hey, good morning. I got something in my throat this morning. Little frog hanging out in there. So Annie agreed that she was not going to go online and be split on screen, but there she is, split screen today.
For a little while.
Okay. So Annie's been working a lot, and the one thing that she's tried to corner me into for a long time is, how are we going to do this ranges and put the range chart together, because ranges are vital for understanding kind of how well you're doing, but at the same time, it gives that direction as far as how to eat or drink. Are you eating enough, and are you drinking enough? And that's why most of the time we tell people to focus in on just getting pH strips and a refractometer at a minimal, and learn to watch your urine pH and how to monitor your Brix on whether you're eating the wrong foods and drinking enough fluids, And but when you try to put all of this information that we sit here and talk about into a usable chart that says, okay, how can we relay all of this information into a functional handout? That's where Annie comes in and climbs into my brain and then pulls something out, and then she takes this stuff from my brain and puts it on a screen and says, that's what I see out of your brain, Doc. And I'll be like, that's almost it. Let's do this with it.
Sometimes it's, no, that's not what I meant at all. It's a journey. So
anyway, Marty D, missed you too. Thank you. Good morning, Diana. Denara, rather. And but we we worked a lot on this handout, and we went up and back and forth and how to do it, and there's a lot of information that's going to be gathered on this handout. So we're gonna introduce that here in a few minutes, because when we're talking about ranges, Reams talked and he put together an outline of energy efficiency, and it's in his own book, and he talks about these ranges of and what people call the healing range, or the restorative range is what we call it, is where you have your sugars 1.5 to 2, your pHs. See, there's arguments, like Michael Olster teaches 6.2 to 6.8 on the pHs. I think even Bedeau would go 6.2 to 6.8, but Reams explicitly said 6.3 to 6.6, on the pHs. Conductivity 6 to 10 is what's normally accepted as the the healing range for the conductivity. Cell debris, they want a 1 to 4 m. You need to have junk coming out in your urine if you're going to improve efficiency and get the body to start processing things. So as you improve your cellular and energy efficiency, your body starts getting rid of waste, and you start seeing all this cell debris. And Reem's talked about, we've talked about cell debris, where it just gives you an idea of whether the body's cooperating. Because if it's not, and you're not getting rid of those bad cells, then there's an issue. There's something going on there. And then finally, the ureas. That was, to me, what I found the most controversial, because everyone says healing ureas are 15 to 19. Okay, and that's how they would leave it. They just say they 15 to 19, and I'd be like, and I argued, and I was with Betty Reams Hernandez, and I'm like, Betty, that you can't just say 15 to 19, because you could have a 3/12, and believe me, that's not healing. That's not a healing range at all. That is somebody who is breaking down and disintegrating, And so, so I kind of went back and looked at those total ureas, and I put them as, 10 to 12 over 5 to 7. So you're hitting on that 10 to 12 on a 10 and a 10 over 5 or a 12 over 7. That's keeping you within that 15 to 19. You start seeing that ammonia levels go up above 7. You start seeing overgrowth in the digestive tract, and you just see certain things start happening at certain levels. That to me, to outline a 15 to 19, I think you had to have a little bit more of a parameters that say what are we looking at here from a standpoint of cell debris, protein building, protein breakdown, and that type of stuff. So, but Reams talked about, he outlined range A through E is what he did. And he said a general degree of efficiency. So when you're in range A, or that restoration range, he literally says that you're 95 to 100% energy efficient. So, and your chemistry will fluctuate. You could be there for a couple minutes in a day, and hey, I hit that, and damn, then I drop right out of it, based upon, because it's constantly changing. And that's like, we try to be consistent when we take the numbers to do them an hour and a half to 2 hours after you eat. So it's giving us an evaluation of how well your body is utilizing food for energy. And so we're just trying to, there was a standardization, of when to do the testing and those type of things. And so we always try to just, have some consistency, so that you're changing, or you're keeping stable the testing parameters. Hey, we're going to test them at this point in time. We're going to, if you're drinking water systematically, great. If you're drinking juice water systematically, great, do it. Because what we're doing is we're measuring the efficiency of whatever you're doing at the time of when you run those numbers. And so range A is considered 95 to 100% efficient. You have a Brix of 1.5 to 2. You have the pHs of 6.3 to 6.6. You have that conductivity of 6.5 to 10. You have that cell debris of 1 to 4 m, and then you have those nitrates again, 10 to 12 over 5 to 7. So they should add up to 15 to 19. And then you go to range B. Range B, you're moving a little bit more alkaline. You're seeing that the Brix. In my chart that I have, but your sugars are typically between 2.1 to 5.49. You're in that zone of misery. That zone of that sugar crashing zone. Your pHs are 6.9 to 7.2. You can see the conductivity goes between 11 to 35. The cell debris still 1 to 4 m, and the nitrates are still between 12 and 17. You know, they could be low, high, but you're going to see these ratios change. You know, you're not going to see that 10 to 12 over 5 to 7. You're going to, you know, you might see that, like I talked about, you might see a 3 over 12 or something to that effect. But even at, you know, range B, range says that you're still as far as 75 to 95% efficient. That's pretty stinking energy efficient, right? And then you go to range C, and again, you're moving into even a more high alkaline state, you know, but the sugars can be, you know, it's high blood sugar. You can see the sugars 8.5 to 13. You know, I think the highest I've ever seen was a 10.6 that came by this week. And I'm just like, we need to recalibrate, and they and recheck that meter and calibrate the meter to make sure that that's what it actually was. Because I have not seen typically a Brix go that high. But again, you know, the conductivity, the salts go up to 36 to 80, large variations. It's about high alkaline states, you know, the pH of 7.3 to 8.4, extreme alkalinity. You know, so in those range C, you see these sinus issues and you see constipation and you're still 50 to 75% energy efficient. And then range D is where it drops acid, you know, and then all of a sudden, and you see those super low sugars. So you see the sugars go between 0.5 to 0.9 on range D, the urine and saliva pH between 5.2 to 6.1, really 6.2, because 6.3 is considered the range A, right? So the conductivity, low conductivity with the low sugars, you know, 3 to 5, really low. I mean, so if you start seeing people who have an inverted sugar to salt ratio, and they start, you know, their sugar to salt ratio is 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 salt ratio, those people are anemic, you know. And in range D, you're weak. You really are. And you're running, you know, 20 to 50% efficient. In range E, you're running 0 to 20% efficient. So I'm going to ask Annie to, do you have that? Were you able to pull that up?
Yes, we have it.
Let me see if you can pop that up and see where we are.
There you go.
Is it up?
Yep.
Let's see. And oh my, there it is. People, you guys are the very first to witness this, by the way. So, so here's what we did as an energy range chart. You know, and when you look here, you turn around, and now she's floating it around on the screen. That's kind of interesting.
Well, I had to make it bigger.
So the but here's what we have. You know, energy ranges, and so first off, it says my rules of interpretation. Okay, so these are not Reams's rules. These are not Badeau's. These are not Michael Olson's. These are not Dr. Manthey's. These are not any RBTI practitioner except for me. You can agree to disagree, but I'm sitting here trying to explain to people how to understand ranges. And so the set of rules, the first thing you'll notice is that it turns around and says, avoid your food sensitivities. Okay, where do you learn that in RBTI? You don't. But I'm telling you that it is huge, and that avoiding food sensitivities is something that you have to learn to identify in your number patterns. And I've talked about that at least 100 times, you know, so hopefully you can go back to an old show and identify and learn how to do that. Number 2 is low glycemic veggies. So when I break down the BC, you know, the prominent calciums that are in food, you know, I break them down to high glycemic and low glycemic, because let's talk about Reams's no-no foods, okay? So what were Reams's no-no foods? Number 1, high glycemic foods: alcohol, popcorn, chocolate, potatoes, you know, things that were high glycemic. Now, what was another no-no food? Something that drove up was sea salt, something that drove up conductivity. And then things that irritated the digestive tract: nutmeg, black pepper, black tea, you know, things that were irritating to the digestive tract, you know, because it affected the absorption of your minerals and the ability to use them. And then there were no foods, which were considered non-kosher foods, because Reams basically tested and said, hey, you eat food that's not kosher, and although it's not a sin to eat it, I can analytically show you that your body does not process it, and God knew something when he told the Israelites not to eat it. So pork, shellfish, alligator, and squirrels, rabbits, there were reasons that he said don't eat it, and he would see that it would mess with people's numbers. So avoid food sensitivities. It's huge. Low glycemic veggies. 2, 3, mono unsaturated oils, the olive and avocado oil, because the body knows how to deal with them. I'm not telling you never eat coconut oil. I mean, there are people who thrive on it, and stuff like that. But I am telling you from a standpoint of utilization and the body's ability to accept and controlling inflammation and to accept and utilize these foods, just read Stephen Gundry's stuff, with the plant paradox and the longevity paradox. His longevity paradox, he believes that, food, the purpose of food is for you to get more olive oil in your body. I don't fully agree with that, but there's definitely an aspect of the body's ability to utilize monounsaturated oils. Easily digested proteins. Why? Because as you go down, you'll learn that, if I can show you how on this chart, how metabolic typing and correlates with our ranges. And I'll go over that. But, although that type DE people are in need of protein and low carbohydrate diets, they don't digest the protein. So they do well with easily digested protein. So know your plant proteins. Hemp is great, people. Hemp, quinoa, but it's got to be pressure cooked because of those lectins. You do want to destroy lectins in food if you're prone to inflammation. But easily digested proteins. I'm not against soy, nor was Reams. Reams loves soy. He said children should eat soy-based products until the age of 12 and stay away from meat. They couldn't digest it, but he wasn't. But that's before they started genetically modifying in 1994. So he wasn't dealing with GMO crap. And within 10 years of 1994, did you hear about celiac disease? Everybody knew about celiac disease by the early 2000s. Why? Because they started genetically modified foods and everybody started getting gastrointestinal disorders, more so than normal. Well, I don't want to go there. Lemon, 1-to-9 ratio with meals, So that 1-to-9 ratio, 1 ounce of lemon to 9 ounces of distilled water, and drinking 3 ounces of that, but having that lemon water with your meals at a minimum is key, because it's going to stimulate that bile, that digestion. It's going to help you to be an anionic dispersant. And then finally, distilled water. And we've talked about distilled water. We've talked about lemon, just from my interpretation and the rules is as far as a restoration range and staying in that range, these are things that you have to maintain in order for you to see that chemistry fall in line. You will not. You'll have ups and downs. It'll always happen. But to see stability in your chemistry, that's where you got to be consistent with how you're eating and learning the patterns of how things eat. So as you go down here and you look at these energy ranges, and it says, range E, range D, range A, range B, range C. And I talk about it. So range A, there's that, 95 to 100% energy efficient. And you go across, there's that 1.5 to 2, 6.3, 6.6, the numbers just as I talked about them, And then what we do is we have the lowest range, E, on the top, and because it just aligns with the pH and the bricks. If you look at the values of how to get from A to the moving away from A, E is the furthest away, and it doesn't. But the reason we have it in the center is because just watch how the pattern of the numbers goes. And so we're trying to get you into a healing range, and when the numbers fall away in a particular area, they fall into that range. And we mostly look at that urine pH And you'll notice it says food choices and ratio determined by urine pH. Why? Because if you have a Brix of 0.5 and then you have 6.3 over 6.6, you have a pHs of 6.3 over 6.3, and you have a conductivity of 6 and cell debris of 4M, and your nitrates are 10 to 12 over 5 to 7, but that Brix is 0.5 and you're crashing all the time, then you are in range E, right? Overall, your energy efficiency stinks because you have no sugar regulation. And so overall, your energy efficiency is in range E, and you're only as strong as your weakest link in the chain when you're looking at going across these variables. However, right, your pHs are 6.3 to 6.6. So does that mean that you should only eat DE foods? And DE foods are foods that have prominent calcium that raise your pH, that push your pH up, because if your pH is in the DE range, particularly the E, say your pH is 4.8 to 5.4, then you should be eating foods that have prominent calcium that will raise and push that pH up, right? So when you're looking at energy ranges and food ranges, that's where we're trying to make a distinction here by that little thing that says food choices and ratio determined by urine pH. That is not something that you're going to find out there. That is, when you're trying to understand how to eat based upon your range, you have to turn around and understand that you go by the urine pH as far as choosing your foods. That's huge. That's huge in this concept. So let's go across this for a second. So let's say that you fall in the A range and then you go all the way across. It says, what foods do I eat? It says any BC or DE ratio based upon the numbers. And then we say 30 to 40% protein, fat, carbs, and protein, fat, or carbohydrates. So because that falls into oxidation rate, which is at the bottom of this stage. And so let's say you go into the DE range D, and you go over to that right. It says, what do I eat? It says 60 to 80% DE foods, and then 20 to 40% BC foods. Why? Because the goal is to get all 6 forms of calcium in your diet every day. So you don't just eat only DE foods. You need all those different forms of calcium in a ratio. But what we're trying to let you understand here is that because depending on how far you are away on your urine pH dictates what percentage of those BC or those DE foods that you're eating. So the further you are away from A, and say it's E in the acid form, okay, so your urine pH is more acidic and you're in range E, furthest away, then range E, it says, hey, you should eat 80 to 100% DE foods. Near all of them, because you need that calcium form to push that pH. And as the pH starts to move, you start bringing in more BC foods. I need that to make sense. So as you move up, as your pH moves up, you go to 60 to 80% DE foods and 20 to 40% BC foods, or go the opposite direction. So if you're in range B, you eat 60 to 80% BC foods and then 20 to 40% DE, because you need all of those forms of calcium. Or if you're in the high, really high alkaline state, range C, like we were talking, then you're eating 80 to 100% BC foods. Why? Because you need mostly the calciums that are in those BC foods to move that pH back towards the ideal. And as the pH of the urine starts moving back towards range A, you can bring in DE foods. And when you're in range A, you get to choose on both sides of the fence. That's where Betty's like, hey, you can eat anything. Yeah, but if you only eat BC foods or if you only eat DE foods, you're going to swing your pH outside of that number. What you do is you find that you should eat roughly a certain percentage. Some people need to eat a higher percentage of BC foods, and some people need to eat a higher percentage of DE foods to maintain themselves in the A range. Does that make sense? That's the question. I need that to make sense to people. Okay. And then, because it says even here, like when we talk about, I want to go to the bottom of this, and we say that you're looking at the, I can't even read it, Annie. But I'm looking at the bottom, and we talk about DEA versus BC, and we correlate it with metabolic typing. And I want you to look at that, because DE are fast oxidizers. You are so acidic, you're over oxidizing things and you're breaking down. You're in a catabolic state, and you need to slow it down. So you need protein and fat. But the problem is if you go up in the middle of the range, there's this little white writing that says DE, range does not digest protein well. So you need vegetable-based proteins, but you need more protein and fat and low carbohydrate, because carbs are going to speed your process up. You need to slow that process down. And so whereas if you look at the BC, they do the higher carbs. So they do, 50 to 60% carb, 20 to 30% protein, 10 to 20% fat. They don't digest fats either well. You can look at their blood on behind, and you can see that they're not breaking down fats. And as you go through and you look at that, you're going to see, the symptoms that are correlated with metabolic typing, and the DE, it says fast digestion, parasympathetic dominant. They're frequently hungry. They crave salty and fatty foods. They have a tendency towards fatigue, anxiety, nervousness. There's all these symptoms. And that's not, you could turn around and we could correlate those with, by looking at the values of conductivity. We could correlate those with the values of low pHs. We could correlate those, with the various values on the thing. But when you're looking at metabolic typing, the symptoms are, they correlate right with those ranges. And so metabolic typing is a concept that became popular by a chiropractor named Wolcott, Wolcott. And there were other guys. There was one named Crystal, Krystal, who taught metabolic typing. And nowadays, if you look up metabolic typing, and, understanding metabolic typing, the first names that pop up are Dr. Oz and Dr. Mercola. Well, Mercola, he's being shunted off the internet, so he doesn't pop up on many searches at all right now, unless you're actually trying to hear about what's going on. But Andy, you can go ahead and pull that down. But the idea is to help people to understand that there's a correlation with metabolic typing and the speed of metabolism and your metabolism and how we're supposed to eat. And so what I've tried to do with this, and you guys can tell me, what do you think? And I pull up and let me see if anybody made any comments on this while they had enough time to look at it. But let me see. Missed you last week. Denara, in my situation, can I use Synthroid along with vitamins to suppress Hashimoto? You probably need Synthroid. And yes, you probably need vitamins as well. Yeah, you should be taking both. Hello, I am Betty's friend. I'm here for the first time. Nice. Thanks for coming on, Monday. Indy, good morning. Great graphic. Good. Thank you. Let's see. Great graphics. So helpful. I need to purchase the urea testing equipment for the lady. Do you sell them? Yes, we do. Super info. Thank you. Can we find this info on your site? No, you cannot. That information is at some point going, if what's going to happen is you guys are going to turn around and go back and lock the screen and try to print it off and whatever else. And, by watching it later on, but that's the information that will be in the book. That's the information that will be to coalition members as we get the coalition up to a point where we can share information between practitioners and everybody else. So, but that's, that's the whole idea, is the proprietary information that's going to go along with on just helping people to understand and learn this stuff. This is our goal. So we want this to be functional. Can you guys give me some feedback here? I mean, is there anything that did not make sense on that chart? Is there anything that you would say, any questions on that chart? Is there, because the difference here is that Reams taught energy efficiency based upon ranges. And so what I'm teaching here is not that your urine pH dictates your energy range. Okay. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that your urine pH dictates what foods you choose, because it's the source of calcium in the food that influences direction of how the pH is going to move. You still, if you are a sugar crasher and you're running 0.4, 0.5 and staying in that E range, you're still energy efficient as crap. You are still tired. You're still crashing. You're still having all these nasty symptoms. But it means, from a food choice standpoint, that if your bricks is where your problem is, and your pH is staying in that A range, right? Then you eat based upon that A range. But if your bricks is all over the place, you need to figure out how to control your sugars. How do you do that? Protein with every meal if you're in range E, because you need a higher protein diet. It slows things down. Or you need juice in your water. You need something to keep that sugar from crashing out, And so we've talked about this. We've talked about each one of those parameters and how to go and address it. But when we're talking about food choices, nobody, to my knowledge, other than Betty Reams Hernandez, has taught people how to pick foods based upon the ranges. I know Thomas Gano is a strong advocate of eating all 6 of these prominent calciums in your diet every single day. And there are foods like moringa, and there's foods like yellow crooked neck squash and purple potatoes, or even, or mangoes are great because they have 4 or 5 prominent calciums in them, and they're good to eat on a regular basis, even though they might have a tendency towards being slightly moving your chemistry one direction. They have all those various prominent calciums in them. So you're getting that variety every day. Ream says that if you have that variety of calciums in your diet, that the chemistry starts to stabilize. And he did it with food. Food, people. We want to eat foods that have that key role on moving our chemistry, not just taking more supplements. Okay? Supplements are great. We could talk about supplements another day. Annie's going to work on a supplement chart one day. I wanted to see her face.
I was going to say, that sounds like a concise one.
So the goal is, how do we turn around and relay the information to make RBTI practical? And that's what this energy food choice guideline is. Basic rules. Avoid your food sensitivities. Learn to identify them. Low glycemic veggies. Eat lots of them. Easily digested proteins. I'm not telling you never eat meat. Just based upon your numbers, you'll know whether you can eat more or less meat, because your numbers will show it. We talked about, that ratio of lemon water, 1 to 9 ounce ratio, and drinking at least 3 ounces with your meals, because that ratio, Reams determined, had the same concentration and the pH of what you needed to be equal to your bile of your liver. So he is basically helping you to make a dilute hydrochloric acid that actually alkalizes the body. And we've talked about the still water and its effects on alkalizing the body. We've talked about the effects of lemon and being anionic and causing an anion reaction that causes a dispersing effect of your food and helps you to pull more energy out of that food. So you can't put everything in a chart. God, believe me, he would verify that I have tried to put everything in a chart. And Annie's like, Doc, it's not going to be a chart. It's just going to be a picture with a lot of words trying to cram everything you want to say in there.
It's a challenge.
So let me see. I'm curious if Reams determined which foods ate. Yeah, he did. Reams says all food was cationic, except for lemons. 100%. Lemons are the only 100% fully anionic food. Otherwise, foods have a tendency towards being cationic or anionic based upon the prominent calciums. And that's how we determined the prominent calcium food list that was compiled together by Manthe. And then, which the only chart that was out there for years was based upon Michael Alsta. And there were some discrepancies in it. And then Thomas Guénaud came out and he kind of repurposed the chart. And then he came out with his chart, and his chart's available, I believe, online. And then I turned around, and I'm the only one who's turned around and said, if we're going to eat based upon prominent calciums, based upon what range we're in, why would you want to hunt through a food chart to see where I can eat? Why not break it down to BC foods or DE foods? It's the only logical conclusion is what it made to me. And so I turned around and broke it down, and I created it here, and I did, DE range and BC range foods, and then I have B and D, B and C foods, and it says prominent calciums with acidic or neutral pH. And then we broke them down based upon what the food category is instead of the calciums. So you didn't have to go through a calcium chart and look for your food. I broke them down to vegetables, leafy greens, herbs, grains, fruits, dairy, protein, beverages, sweeteners, and then miscellaneous. And then I did the same with the DE foods. So on the DE, you go to range DE, and there's your vegetables, your fruits, your oils, your beans, your legumes, your herbs, your grains, your beverages, proteins, dairies, nuts, seeds. I broke them down on food category and said, hey, if you're in this range, you eat these. If you're in this range, you eat these. And now I'm sitting here saying, hey, in reality, you eat on both ranges, but what percentages that you're pulling those foods from is based upon where your urine pH is hovering and how you're maintaining it. And what you do is as you start testing yourself, your urine pH, particularly an hour and a half to 2 hours after you eat, and you start seeing that certain foods make your pH shoot up or certain foods make your pH crash down. If your pH is crashing down, correlate it with the bricks. If the bricks goes up and your pH goes down, you probably ate a food allergy. But you start learning which foods you react to. That's why it's so individualized. You can't turn around and say, okay, you're in the DE foods, so I want you to only focus in on, let's eat these fruits, eat apricots and bananas and cherries and guava or kiwi. We could turn around but it doesn't, you could turn around and find that kiwi for that person, which is, basically has that calcium carbonate in it, that for you, oh my God, it shoots your pH up. But for me, it does nothing because I need the calcium oxide, and I need to eat guava instead. So it's based upon how you react. And so Reams just said one man's food is another man's poison. Same thing Dr. Diadamo said with the blood type diet. Same thing various doctors have said over the years, you know, by bringing in the concepts of food sensitivities. And that's why if you look at the very basics of watching this video again, when Annie brought up that chart, it said, my rules and interpretations, number one, avoid food sensitivities. People, I have watched autoimmune conditions reverse by avoiding food sensitivities. I have seen people with autoimmune conditions who react to corn, for example, get corn out of their diet and all of their autoimmune markers disappear. All of them. Why? We could theorize that and why that's happening. Genetic modification. Let's go to the Frankenfoods, right? And let's blame it on big pharma, you know? But bottom line, you know, that food make them susceptible to some type of reason for their body to try to attack itself. It either put a protein in there or it ran the body down to where it couldn't protect itself from some type of viral or parasitic means, probably. I don't know. You know, but we can postulate, we can look at their blood and get an idea. We can do electrodermal testing and get an idea. That's why I don't just go by RBTI. That's why I use other tests to confirm and let RBTI explain it. RBTI gives us that efficiency picture and tells us if things are moving in the right direction. It's a degree of efficiency. And as you move things towards efficiency, you get better. And as you move things away from efficiency, you get worse. And if you can identify what's moving you away or what's moving you towards, you have a way of identifying what's making you feel better and not. And knowing it for you. That's the key here. So let's go here. Moringa raises pH. Great for dysentery. Yeah. Moringa is a superfood. I would agree. Has 6 prominent calciums in it. I think it has all 6 of them. We are waiting patiently for your book. Thank you. Let's see. Hi, Luke. Good day. Good day. Denard, can you please explain how to subscribe for the coalition? And as a permanent patient at first arrival, we're off if we sign the coalition paper. Yeah, you joined the coalition when you came in here to my office. Yep. And the coalition website is it's bioelectriccoalition.org, I believe. However, you know, the current way of subscribing is only it goes through my office and puts you underneath me. And if you join right now, you're not going to be able to get the information. We don't have it established to where we have all the information available for people. It's right now it's just a formality of because of private practice, and we have it. We have the coalition established. We have members established, but we don't have it to where it's providing the information as a member that we the content. And we have Annie who's controlling the content.
I don't know about that. Let's put it together in a nice package.
He is putting it together in a nice package. I think that's the last thing is we're putting together a nice package so we could submit it to to publishers, and then we want to make it available on the coalition as well. The hardest part with the coalition is getting it to where we can have other practitioners and testers and being able to have, when you're going to the coalition, you're joining randomly, that you will gather information from it and that you will have access to other testers and have people listed as testers and those type of things so that they can so that you can find it. We want to bridge all this stuff together. That's kind of the goal with it. So anyway, what else we have here? How is it determined as well? How is what determined, Andy? Did Reams determine which foods ate? Yeah. So a prominent calcium food list, determines which calcium sources are primarily in your foods. And anionic calciums are listed on the food list because anionic calciums mean that they raise your pH. They bring it up. They make it more anionic. And that's calcium carbonate, calcium oxide, calcium citrate. Tricalcium phosphate does that too. But as far as foods are concerned, it was identified the calcium carbonate, oxide, and citrates. So those are your anionic alkaline forming calcium. So those are going to be in your B or your DE foods. You have neutral calciums, which are primarily gluconate and orotate. And Betty Reams loves to tell the story about black olives. And if you go to the prominent calcium food list and you look up calcium orotate, the only food that you're going to see listed is black olives. And Betty tells a story how her dad made her eat 3 olives a day. And I encourage people, just from a neutral source of calcium, that, having a couple black olives in your salads a day is not a bad idea. And then your cationic, your acid forming calciums are calcium phosphate, calcium lactate, and calcium dolomite. And dolomite, so you may have heard of these calciums. Dolomite has some magnesium aspects to it, but those cationic calciums, they will lower your pH. So like people talk about dolomite. Hey, my nitrates are on my first test at 17. And they say you need dolomite, but if your pH is below 6.3, I'd never give dolomite because dolomite is so acid forming. I give dolomite when I have somebody in the BC range that's their pHs are, say 6.8 to 7.2, and they have high nitrates because dolomite just crashes that pH, people, and you just got to use it carefully. And I have people who start on these things. I'm like, yeah, I'll follow up in 6-8 weeks, and 6-8 weeks of dolomite, and next thing you know, you're going to be swing your chemistry to where it's going to be hard to get you to come back out of it. So yeah, the Reams determine based upon the prominent calcium that food will have an overall effect to move the pH. And he said, don't believe those alkaline acid forming foods because what they did in those foods is that they burned those foods to a crisp, collected the ash, and then they solubilized the ash and they tested the pH. And they determined like, oh, okay, this one is the ash is acidic forming. The ash of this one's alkaline forming. And Reams is like, that's not true. That's not how to determine it. And so because there's multiple sources of calcium. And so Reams just basically broke it down on specific calcium sources. So let's see if that's about it. Denara, 11-year-old son has type 1 diabetes for 4 years now. Do you think he can be cured using RBTI? RBTI is going to hold a perspective, but your son has a viral issue, and he probably has Coxsackie virus. You need to go look up, go to the National Institutes of Health, NIH. It's under environmental health perspectives. So if you Google environmental health perspectives, you'll see the NIH pop up, and then you go into that, you open that up. It's the National Institutes of Health, and they have a search engine on the top. Type Coxsackie, COXSA. COXSACKIE, I think, Coxsackie virus and type 1 diabetes. And believe me, you will find a connection between Coxsackie virus. And so people don't just develop, one moment they're normal and the next they're not. They say it's an autoimmune condition that's attacking his pancreas. It's more than likely a virus that's attacking his pancreas. And you can use RBTI in combination with a couple other things to inhibit and eradicate the virus. And then you can see where the pancreas will start responding. You don't just stop insulin ever. And you don't start an RBTI program in a type 1 diabetic without knowing what you're doing, because that insulin is a salt and it's stored in the tissues. And as you start drinking that distilled water and you start flushing it, you will bottom that boy's sugars out. And you can put him in a coma. So let's not just turn around and say RBTI can it cure type 1 diabetes. I'm not going to make a claim. But have I seen a type 1 diabetic go off insulin? Yes, I have. And but I'm not going to tell you how to do it. That is something that is all within RBTI. Practitioners say, hey, don't do this. Everywhere it says, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. You need to have a medical understanding. You're going to have shifting of potassium. You're going to have, you got to understand these numbers before you even take on something like that. And you have to have him using something that will eradicate a virus if you're going to do that. For hypothyroid, do you recommend supporting the thyroid with bovine over the counter thyroid? I do like bovine thyroid glandulars, New Zealand based, New Zealand, they know that they're a little bit cleaner. They're organic. They're not adding all the crap. They don't have prions there. But yeah, using glandulars is definitely something that I would consider in a thyroid disorder. If you have bad adrenals, eat adrenal. You have a bad heart, eat heart. You have a bad thyroid, eat thyroid. If you have a bad liver, eat liver. The glandulars somehow recognize and know how to, when we eat them, that the peptides or the amino acid structure knows how to fortify and tonify our own glands. And so, but it doesn't just mean go get a New Zealand glandular and start eating it if you have a thyroid disorder, because that can activate that thyroid and swing you. Again, you should be followed, people. I mean, if you should have a basis of understanding the stability and looking at what these numbers. If you have a thyroid disorder, you probably have a potassium utilization disorder. You probably have low nitrates. You got to get that potassium status corrected. And we have talked about that in the numbers. We've gone over, we've talked about thyroid disorders, so all of that. So to me, I think that kind of goes through for a basis of a decent show. I don't know, Annie, you're awful quiet today.
Just letting you talk. It's all good. No, it's a good show. I think you covered great stuff. We didn't even get to numbers. You had so much to say.
Wow. Yep. I think we can turn around and cut this show end the show early then. So going by the numbers always. Exactly, Marsha. It's what we do. And so those numbers don't lie, people. I would tell you to trust those numbers. I would tell you to just learn the basics of what those numbers are telling you. I would, take the general aspects. If they're moving towards improvement, then you are going to see an improved energy efficiency. The ranges tell you overall energy efficiency, and you have to be energy efficient in order for your body to restore. You have to basically generate more energy than you're consuming. That's the whole basis. Ream says the day that you consume more energy than you get from your food is the first day of disease. Okay? And we talk about that on our restoration model with a threshold, and we've put all of this stuff up before you. And the goal today was to say, look, you do this with food. And we got to get you to be able to recognize how to pick your foods and to eat consistently to control your chemistry. Because once you start testing it the stability will come. And you will be like, okay, you know, this is getting old. I'm bouncing all over the place. Yeah, initially you will. It'll move, and you'll see foods that swing it, and it's frustrating learning your patterns. It really is. But once you kind of get that stability in there, and you learn what foods trigger you off and what foods don't, and you realize like, oh, it's not worth me eating that, as good as that is, you know, and you start turning around and you get that stability in your chemistry, then you don't have to test all the time, because you just, you know, there's that self-awareness of what's going on. And so that's where we want to help you to get to that point. But these guidelines that we did with the charts and these type of things, and Annie putting this stuff together has just been incredible. Thank you, Annie.
Okay.
And
gives me a purpose, Doc.
What was that?
Gives me a purpose. I get to help. I like being helpful.
Well, thank you. So anyway, people, I thank you. I hope you enjoyed the show. Just thank you for hanging in there. Sorry about missing out last week. Until next week.